Championship game Monday night. Georgia, near 2-touchdown favorite. I haven't looked lately at whether it's 13.5 or 15 or whatever it is, but it is a 2-touchdown favorite at this. They are a 2-touchdown favorite at this particular time. So, Kirby Smart, when asked about the rosters, both Georgia and also TCU.
Yeah, I never look at it through the perspective of a lot of people look at it as it's all about, what your kids were rated when they came in. I mean, Coach Dykes inherited a lot of those players and got some, through the portal and things, but you got what you got, and what you do with what you have is what makes you a coach. And he's done a tremendous job with the players that he has and has inherited, and I feel like we've done the same with the ones we've gone out and recruited. So I never get too caught up in how it was built. It's kind of like, okay, you gave me my mold, and now I've got to try to go make something out of it. And you do the best job you can with what you got, and that's what you focus on. It's all, at the end of the day, everybody gets into all those ratings and all those things over and over again. It's about the chemistry of a team, and I would venture to say that these two teams probably have some of the best chemistry across the country.
If they did the polls, which a lot of times,
a tremendous team, a tremendous program. He's won.
Stop it. There you go. Thank you very much. If the national championship, and again, a lot of times when you do get the major chunk of the 4 and 5 stars, that surely helps. But if they went by that, then there would be a lot of teams that were in the semifinals, not TCU.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the question that was asked to him, which I left out because you could barely hear it on the teleconference, was the rosters are constructed in a completely different fashion. I mean, Georgia, goes to the 5-star store and just picks what they want, right? And TCU's had to, 14 guys from the transfer portal on this year's roster, and, Sonny Dykes didn't bring in, the majority of the guys. I mean, Gary Patterson built the roster over the years, and then there was attrition from that. So the fact that they're here is that the rosters are different. You mentioned the 2-touchdown spread. Well, that's why there's a 2-touchdown spread almost as much as anything, is because of the way that these rosters are constructed and in the history of these two teams. So, yeah, but TCU's kind of defied it. And, that was Kirby Smart's really nice way of saying that, and also trying to avoid, I'm afraid of these guys mostly because of that. Like that's what maybe would scare me the most about TCU if I was Georgia, is these guys don't seem to know that they're not supposed to be as good as everybody else. Nobody's told them, or if they have, it just doesn't translate to them.
Oh, I think that's part of why they have a chip on their shoulder, because I think they all know that. Yeah.
Well, and I think if they didn't know it by now, they're one of 2 teams still standing. Mm-hmm. So if they thought that before, they certainly can't possibly believe that now, that they're somehow inferior in any way. And this is part of the benefit of the transfer portal. Without the transfer portal, TCU is not in any way, shape, or form standing in this game. No freaking way. Even if they still hired Gillespie and Riley and Dykes, they're not here without the transfer portal. They're also not here without Gary Patterson's staff and the recruiting job that they did either. So it's a combination of things. Georgia did it. Number 1 recruiting classes, number 2 recruiting classes for, top 5 recruiting classes for consecutive years. TCU, 20 to 30 type of recruiting classes, 20s to 30s, without researching it and knowing the exact numbers, in that vicinity. And then a super duper, number of transfers that have all had major impacts and some great coaching hires. So, it's rosters have been constructed slightly differently, but I don't think that there's this massive gap, as evidenced by the fact that TCU went out and handled their business against Michigan. So I think that Georgia is rightfully the favorite here because of just the entire thing that we've seen. But I think to just rule out TCU entirely is a little bit foolish.
I think it would be very foolish. Kirby Smart also, I think this is ready, Garrett, asked about just what Sonny Dykes and TCU have done.
Yeah, they got a tremendous team, a tremendous program. He's won everywhere he's been. He's done a great job. Their kids believe. They have, I feel like, just reading and listening about them, a lot of similarities to our kids in terms of the culture created there, the way they play, the way they believe. I think I saw a stat, they have the most comebacks in college football, in the fourth quarter. And that shows what your mental makeup is. Their conference, they've been in a lot of tight ball games, and they've won those tight ball games and done an incredible job with what they do, and they create really tough situations defensively, do an incredible job on special teams, have one of the best returners that I've probably ever faced in the return game, and score a lot of points on offense with a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback. So it's a recipe to be playing for the national championship.
Kirby Smart saying all the right things, but all of what he said is true. Everything that he mentioned about TCU is true. And Sonny Dykes was also asked about the expanded playoffs and how that will affect college football. And, of course, the fact there used to be just 2 teams or no teams in a playoff overall. It's been a while since there wasn't a BCS or now what we have with the college football championship at the playoffs. And here's Sonny Dykes.
Yeah, you know what? I have. I mean, I've thought that way for a long time. You know, there was probably about a 6-hour period at some point in my life in the middle of the night where Mike Leach had actually convinced me it was good for a 64-team playoff. But that's a whole other story. And like I said, I woke up the next day and talked myself out of it. Yeah, I think 12 is going to be great. I mean, look, I think there's a lot of good football teams that deserve to be in the playoff. And, you know, I've always believed that the cream rises and, you know, the more opportunities that schools, you know, outside of the traditional brands get, the more those schools can become traditional brands. You know, I think if you exclude them, it's hard to break in. And I think this will give a lot of schools, you know, like TCU, an opportunity to, you know, to get in the mix and show what they're capable of. And, you know, we were fortunate this year to get into the 14 playoff, and we were fortunate to beat a very good Michigan team and advance. And, you know, and our prize is we get to play Georgia now. And so, yeah, but I look, you can't help but look at how much fun it's going to be when we get to that 12. And it's going to be, like everything else, it's going to be a work in progress, and there's going to be some things that I'm sure we don't like about that. But at the end of the day, the best thing is it's going to include more people. And I'm a big believer in inclusion. And so I think it's going to be a good thing.
All right. Does TCU's run this year at least allow people to understand even more, Cincinnati last year, why the expansion is a good thing? I know there's still going to be some of those traditionalist or whatever, elitist. Oh, my God, no. But TCU getting to not just the semifinals, but getting to the championship game, does that help some people understand the importance of this?
I hope so. But, I mean, I think the people who are holding out are always going to be holding out. And they're going to use any excuse that they can to show that, like, you know, so if Georgia beats TCU by 13 points or 15 or whatever, if they cover the spread, they'll say, well, you know, TCU got lucky against Michigan but couldn't beat Georgia, which is not, I mean, that's insulting to Georgia and to TCU. Like, maybe Georgia just had a really good day again. Like, maybe, you know, TCU ran out of gas. Maybe somebody got hurt that was important in the game. That was the key matchup that they could win. Those are all those things that happen in games and can happen to Georgia as well. You know, so, you know, because those same people will say, so say TCU beats Georgia by 15. The narrative
that
from
would be hilarious, man.
But the narrative from those
Meltdown.
people, the narrative from those people will be, well, this is clearly a Georgia team that was a little bit down, and we didn't realize it until the championship game. And you're like, how can a team be down and make it to the championship game? Stop it! Like, that's not the case. It's played between the lines. That's why you do it. But there is always going to be those people. I think the majority of college football fans, and actually the majority of the people who cover college football, realize that this is a good thing and see that the numbers will shift as the game shifts. If anything is proven that, you know, moving into conferences or giving people more opportunities, TCU proves that. They were a Mountain West team just a decade ago, and now they're in the national championship. That proves that if, you know, you give a team resources and time, they can grow.
Yeah, I think a few different things. It's probably going to need more time to really like flesh out people's opinions on the playoff, but some people will probably still use this as a reason as to, you know, why expansion is bad, simply because if TCU were to beat Georgia, then they'll say, well, TCU did that, but they couldn't have done this and won 2 more games. Like, yeah, they beat Michigan and Georgia, but in the new format, they would have had to have beaten like Florida State in the first round, and then they would have had to have beaten NC State, and then they would have had to have beaten Michigan, and then they would have had to be like, they're not set up for that. They don't have the blue chips for that. They don't have the depth for that. And I think that's valid in some cases, but I also think in the transfer portal era, a lot of those concerns are thrown to the wayside because you can get depth. You can get star players in more quickly rather than having to just develop full recruiting classes. So, I mean, TCU, is an example of the benefits of the transfer portal. It's an example of the benefits of a 4-team playoff. I don't know if it'll be necessarily a great example for the expanded playoff, but I do think it makes a stronger case than it doesn't. It absolutely does. Traditionalists wouldn't have had them even in the mix. It would have just been the top 2 teams playing like always. And here's TCU, number 3, and here they are in this game. And that wouldn't have happened without an expanded playoff. Now, does that mean we see like a 7 seed winning a national title anytime soon? I don't know, but I'm sure as heck glad they're going to have an opportunity to do it. And like I said from the very beginning, no, I don't think that the expanded playoff is going to necessarily mean that the TCUs of the world or schools that aren't typically the Texas Techs, the UCLA, whoever's that aren't typically in that game are going to suddenly be in that game because it's an expanded playoff, because it will be challenging to have to win multiple games, like to do what TCU did, but do it 2 times over, albeit you won't be playing necessarily Michigan level or Georgia level in the first and second round per se. But I do think that if you are able to do that, look, if Georgia and Alabama are the teams that are able to do that better than anybody, then what's really different, quite frankly? But if a TCU can go in there and do that, then damn it, they deserve to be in that game. They deserve to be in the national championship game. So they went out, they conquered the road in front of them. And here in a couple years, that road will be a little bit longer. There will be a couple more stops on it. But I think in the era of NIL and transfer portal, it's more doable for a team like TCU now to conquer that mountain than it ever was before. So I'm still all fully on board with it. And quite frankly, watching bowl season, I know Garrett could celebrate like LSU's win, and you're celebrating FSU's win, Paul. And that's all great. That propels them into the next offseason. But there were a lot of games that were not worth watching, man. There was a lot of background noise that had absolutely no meaning behind it whatsoever, that were just on TV because live sports is good for TV. And I do think that shakes that up a little bit, because I think we kind of overrate bowl season a little bit. And I love college football. I love bowl games. But sitting back watching, there was not a lot that to me was really all that appetizing, quite frankly. So I'm all for some more meaningful. It is for teams that are on the way up to get a bowl game for the extra practices as far as that can. But you're right. There were some that were just. I'm not saying do away with bowl season. That's important to have the extra practices. I'm saying the entertainment value, though.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and
is going to be better.
Background noise is the perfect analogy.
Yeah, and the thing is that if you get 2 teams that are on the way up or feel like they're on the way up, like Kansas and Arkansas feel like they're on the way up, even though Arkansas took a dip this year, I think they feel good about their trajectory. That's a good game. Oklahoma didn't have a great year, but they had something to prove to themselves more than anything else.
Yep.
And
even though they lost, they may have gained something out of it.
FSU's on the way up. LSU's on the way up. Now, Purdue, that's the example. LSU's on the way up. Purdue has a new coach, and everybody's opted out. Yeah. So then you get this bowl game that is in no way entertaining to anybody but Garrett.
And how do you make sure that guys still playing games? Well, kind of smart to say, it's a playoff game now, this Idaho Potato Bowl. So you do want to play in it. But, I think it's going to be more entertaining. But you'll still have your other bowl games. Like Oklahoma would not be in the playoff. They'd still have their bowl game. It just wouldn't have been against Florida State, because Florida State would be in this expanded playoff.
They would have been right there in the middle of it. All right, we do have, when we come back,